So we've looked at the numbers of how many people are killed by the police, all right? How many police officers are there, by the way? How many sworn law enforcement officers are there in the U.S.? Do you have any guess? Dude, I've asked this to hundreds of law enforcement officers, and not 1% get the answer. Below 50,000, maybe? Okay, can you go to the next slide? So it's about 900,000. And there's an estimated to be about 65 million encounters. 65 million encounters between police and civilians.
Is that per year?
65 million per year. That's a lot of. This isn't a cop walking down the street, getting a cup of coffee and waving to someone. This is 65 million engagements, 10 million arrests. So in my mind, there are a lot of opportunities for things to go south. 900,000 police. So you got 900,000, right? So some of them are going to be psychopaths. Can we just accept that that's the case? Some are going to be just in it. They're in it for the wrong reason. The other cops wish they weren't cops. The other cops want them out of the force. There's nothing they can do. They're there. Their bosses want them out of the force. It's annoying. They shouldn't be cops. They never should have been cops, but they are, and somehow they got in, and something happens, whatever. But 900,000 sworn police officers. About 65 million engagements, right? Contacts. That's from the FBI, and 10 million arrests. So now, with that in mind, I'm going to use the 422 number, because I understand 6,600 people who were killed by the police. And we're only talking people who were killed by the police. We're not talking about people who were beat up by the police, people who were wrongly convicted, people, all these other things. We're just going to focus on this one thing. In some of the other 6,600 people, even though they were armed, maybe the police found something on them. In some cases, police planted something on them, right? But that probably doesn't happen a lot. But here, we're going to go with 422. Okay, we're going to use that number. Understand, you got it? So I get that. Given these data right here, 65 million contacts, 10 million arrests, is 422 a large number?
I mean, it's a small fraction, but we're still kind of sticking with the idea that you can't place a value on a life.
Okay.
So it's no matter what the denominator is in that, compared to that 422, it's still kind of a large number.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, as you mentioned earlier, it could be anyone. It could be your wife. It could be us three. It could be somebody in this room.
Yeah.
And because of that, somebody's life is forever changed.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'd rather the 422 be added to the 10 million arrests than, them taking their life, because it's not the office's job to do so.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, the system will work itself out. So if you're putting them, charging them, having them go through the courts and whatever, it should work itself out.
It should work itself out.
Yeah.
But things happen. First off, now this is critical race theory stuff, right? So now I'm going into that world. Let's just purely think about race. This is not just about black people and Hispanic people. It's also about white people. And if we were really being honest in this if we were being upfront and straightforward in this conversation about police and police violence and who's harmed and so on, we would be talking about all these numbers in lots of different ways, but we're not. And in part we're not because white people aren't thinking about this stuff, right? And for whatever reason, we're not, because white people are trusting. Not all white, some white people are, right? I'm generalizing, but there is a way in which a lot of white people aren't really putting that out there, and so okay, so that's part of what we're not doing. But we're also, if we were being really honest, we would be talking about this in much more complex ways. But go to the next slide. You're asking police to do a very, very difficult job, almost an impossible. What the police say is you're asking us, the police, to do an impossible job. You're asking us to come into situations, make split-second decisions constantly that involves somebody's life, including involves my own life. my own life as a police officer, right? And you're asking us to never, ever make a mistake and demanding that. And if we make a mistake, right, and we don't want to make a mistake, right? We don't, because you don't. So what's your name?
Ashlyn.
Ashley?
Lynn.
Ashlyn?
Yes.
And so your father is a retired police officer?
Yeah.
And what's your father like?
He's pretty serious.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, he's good. I like him. Love him.
So, is he a nice,
Yeah,
is
he's
he a
great.
psychopath?
No.
Is he a nice guy?
Yes.
What's he say about policing? Does he talk about it? Because a lot of cops don't talk about it with their families.
A little bit. He was actually a police officer in my own town.
Uh-huh.
So that was like, sometimes obviously he had to like keep things private because they were like people we knew or whatever. But I think what you just said like before about how it's a really like hard job was like, you summed it up perfectly. And I agree with like, and I think he would agree with that too.
That it's a really impossible, difficult job.
Yeah, and I mean, he worked with guys who weren't even psychopaths, and he wished that they didn't that he didn't work with them and that they weren't police officers, because some people just aren't meant to do that job, which is scary because it's such a serious job. But he was very good at his job.
And how often were you afraid for your father?
One time.
One time? Did you think about when he left to go to work? How did you sometimes think, like, worry that?
No, it was just like one incident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One incident. Okay. How about him? How often did he talk about being afraid?
No, but I'm sure he did it like with my mom and stuff, but not with me.
What did he say about the changes in being a police officer over the years?
Yeah, so he started in '95. And it was like very different. Like he didn't get a 4-year degree or like anything like that. So it's a little bit more serious now, like to become a police officer. And there's like a lot more rules, obviously, that they're like willing to follow. But considering like when he started, it was very different.
Yeah, a lot of training, so much
Yes.
training, right? Because it has to be like, it has to be, you just can't make a mistake. Remember the story of the police officer who's like a 17-year veteran out in San Francisco? Thought she pulled the taser out and she shot that man. But she didn't pull her taser. She pulled her gun. And even cops. So I've been talking to cops about this. And the cops are saying, dude, she's a bad cop. I mean, and I'm arguing with the cops. So just as a thing, right? This is me thinking out loud. Okay, you all right? This is how my mind works. I have this right here is an earphone. It's an earpiece for me, so I can hear what you're saying in the microphones and so on, right? I have to turn it up, I have to turn it down because I don't want to listen to myself talk. This is my mic, so if I flip this off, we're back on, okay? So I'm constantly back and forth on these, and I make mistakes. I turn the wrong one, and I've been doing this for 37 years or so, right? I don't make mistakes. You just don't make mistakes. It's like forgetting how to walk. Cops made mistakes, and you can't do that because somebody else's life could be involved, right? And so the training is profound. Is your dad a racist?
No.
This is what people think about cops.
No,
right?
I know.
Yeah, I mean, the police are just beside themselves about the moment. I have police who don't allow their children. Their children don't tell any of their friends that they're police officers. Their father's a police officer because have you ever had that experience? Like,
No, I mean, he was like a police officer in my town. So,
So
like,
everybody knows.
Everybody knew, yeah.
Okay, but there are a lot of police who their own children don't even say to anyone that my father or my mother's a police officer because they'll be ostracized, and especially in recent years, it's really, really difficult. There's so much tragedy. There's so much tragedy, and that we're trying to understand and comprehend what this is all about. It's really easy to just look at police and say, oh, these are the racist cops, racist police system, racist this, racist that. It's really easy to do that. It's much more difficult to walk through what the real scenarios are and actually have conversations with real human beings to find out, like, okay, what's really going on? And we have this idea that there's like this blue wall of silence, right, where the police are always going to protect themselves. But that's on the outside. That's not always happening. And when you actually study what goes on inside of police departments, that's not always happening either. Here's the other side that you don't see. If you're a police officer, right? In 2020, 60,000 officers were assaulted. Now, mind you, 10 million arrests, so 60,000 probably isn't that many. And yet it is. It's a lot. Like, what is it? It's a lot, isn't it? Right? But 30% of them were injured as a result of the assaults. 30% of the 60,000, that's a lot of people. And on average, about 50 police officers are killed every year. So now we got this thing. We're living in this society that seems like each side is ramping up the violence, ramping up the violent language. You know, we're screaming at the racist police, and the police are responding in their stoic way with more and more weaponry, because as it gets more dangerous for them, they're going to protect themselves more. On the left, this is 1965. Here are some police officers in Washington, D.C. They're wearing shirts. They have a gun. The gun shoots 6 bullets. They got it. Look, the guy's got another 6 bullets right here. But by the time he reloads his gun, I mean, those of you who are gun people, you know that's going to take a while. And in a stressful situation, you know that's going to be really difficult. This is police here. Here's police today. This isn't even paramilitary policing, right? So police will sometimes wear a Under Armour, then their shirt, and then another bulletproof vest. I mean, this is like, what world are we in? So society ups the game, and then they up the game. And then it's just like we're at war. And then we have these mistakes get made, or police, they break protocol, or they don't follow procedure, or they make a mistake, or whatever it is, or they're assholes and they don't need to be assholes. Things happen. And then on the outside, we look in and we say, like, okay, we think we know what's going on. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think, like, okay, maybe because I do read up on what I believe in or speak about, but I think the message people are trying to say is like, yes, police officers make mistakes.
Yeah.
But should they be accountable for those mistakes?
Yep.
Because, you know, not all the crimes that are committed are intentional.
Yep.
And people go to jail for mistakes they've made. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that, like, they're trying to, like, hound down on. Because, I don't know.
No, so how many law enforcement officers are held accountable for their...
I honestly don't know. There's not, like, enough data out there for me to there's different sources have different data.
Okay, I'm going to give you some data. What do you think? Do you have a sense of it? Do you guys have how many police officers are held accountable?
I mean, how do you define, like, held accountable?
Well, just in
Like,
some
is
way.
getting a
right?
suspension getting held accountable?
Or getting fired?
I don't know. I just
There
know
was
nothing about that
in
data.
a police department I worked with, there were 2 police officers that were texting back and forth, and they were texting the N-bomb, and they got fired.
I feel like a good amount of police officers would be held accountable, but I think sometimes to the stakes they're held accountable, it's not equivalent to the mistake that they made.
Okay, well, okay, I hear you. You said, I feel that. On the basis of what? A feeling, or on the basis of what? Sam, what you just said right there, I feel on the basis of the mistake that the police officer made, they're not held accountable at the same level, right? Something like that. That is huge to say that, right? That is huge to say that. There are a lot of data out there that you could dig into that, you could answer that question. But when we're talking about something like about policing in the United States, and when we're, reading the headlines of CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever the case is, we want to try to get it close to somehow right. Instead of we just come up with these ideas based on our ideology or whatever, right? Yeah. So I think it's fair for you to say that, but that's the kind of thing that gets us in trouble in this kind of conversation.
for the 422 people that died,
Yeah.
how many cops
That were
got
killed.
charged?
Hang on. That were
That were
killed.
killed.
Yeah, they didn't just
unarmed.
die.
Yeah.
They
How
were
many
killed.
of those cops went to jail?
That's a great question.
That's my take on that.
No, and here's the thing. If you watch footage and you find a really, really good cop, right, who's just like, yep, very high standards, black, brown, white, whatever it is, high standards, and you take footage and you watch it with that police officer, you would be blown away at the things that they see that maybe you wouldn't see. And so it may be 422, but there are a lot of things that happen in each particular case. And there are sometimes that cops get off, and sometimes they don't get off, right? But there are things that happen in every particular case. Sometimes they get off, and they shouldn't. And the cops believe that too. And other times, it's complicated. In the past decade, 85,000 law enforcement officers investigated, disciplined, fired. That doesn't mean much of anything, really. But what it means is that, although it does mean that things are happening on a regular basis, should it be higher? I don't know. Some people would think it should be a lot higher. Other people would think maybe it shouldn't be higher. But the point is, we have all these data out there. This right here, these are civilian firearms ownership. There's about 1 billion firearms in the world, and about 40% of them are owned by civilians here in the United States.
Are these like documented firearms? Or
This is estimated. This includes legal and illegal.
Okay.
It's like a war. It's a war zone out there, man. I'm not pro-police. I'm not anti-police. You already hear me talk about discrimination. You already hear me talk about racism. You get all that. The problem is, all of this stuff is just incredibly complicated. So this is what happens for me. I have to walk through, and I'm constantly going back and forth trying to get to the truth or trying to get whatever it is.